Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. This is a special week because it is Food Allergy Awareness. And I know everybody is so excited, just as excited as I am about that. But this week is really important to educating and advocating for food allergies. We should be doing it all year long. But this is the week that we spend a lot of time re-educating and re-emphasizing the importance of understanding food allergies. But today's guest, I'm excited, is Kristin Osborne. She's a disability advocate, a food allergy consultant, and the VP of Education for FACT, which is Food Allergy Anaphylaxis Connection Team. And we'll talk a little bit about what she does for them. So hello, Kristin.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited for us to talk and chat about food allergies.
I am very excited as well. And so let's get everybody, I mean, you've got your disability advocate and you're a VP of Education for FACT, but how did you get into food allergies in general in the first place?
My journey with food allergies began over 24 or so years ago. My husband and I were dating, and he has a fish allergy. And I kind of thought, oh, okay, no issue, not a big deal at all. He had an anaphylactic reaction one day in a restaurant, and that kind of opened my eyes to what someone has to navigate day to day when they have a food allergy. When we got married and had children, I also didn't really think anything of it. I don't know why it didn't process for me that there was a possibility my children could have food allergies, but we have 3 boys ranging from college to elementary. And each of them navigate their own set of food allergies. My oldest is allergic to peanuts, tree nuts, shellfish, and non-baked egg. And my middle son is allergic to wheat, dairy, egg, peanuts, tree nuts. And my youngest is just peanuts and tree nuts. So
you've got a lot to manage in that kitchen.
We do. We navigate a lot. The interesting fact is my husband's allergic to fish, but not shellfish. My older son's allergic to shellfish, but not fish. So sometimes I take one or the other out to eat at specific places, and it just makes eating very interesting in our home.
I am sure. And then you've got to read a lot of labels too, because fish and shellfish are, hidden in some sauces and things like that, but also the other allergens you mentioned too. Wow.
Yeah, it's been tricky trying to navigate, especially different recipes. But I think over the years, the market has really changed as far as options that are available and plentiful that we can just find at the grocery store now. So that's really helped.
Yeah. Okay, so my first one, did you ever use Worcestershire sauce? And what do you use in place of Worcestershire?
We don't, because we can't. Okay. And I've just stopped using it. There's one of those things where I thought when I'm making a really good roast or something and it calls for that, I don't use it. Sometimes I put a little extra tamari in there, but I haven't found, I guess in my opinion, that it really brings out more of a taste than, it would if it was in there. So that's one of the things that we don't have. There's a recipe I was looking at recently that called for fish sauce. And I thought, oh man, if only I could find a vegan fish sauce, my life would be complete.
Okay, task there. Everybody, who's got a vegan fish sauce? And then just to go back, Worcestershire has anchovies in it. So that's why she needs to avoid Worcestershire sauce. So if you didn't know that, Worcestershire does contain fish. And that's just a really important thing, especially, highlighting really what you do in your own home, is that you have to read a lot of the different labels.
Absolutely. Reading labels is probably one of the things that we do and practice it again, even with the older ones. It's just part of our life. It comes second nature.
Yeah, it really kind of does. Now, I named this diagnosis to everyday life, and going to your story when you met your husband and he had a fish allergy. That's kind of like you, from going from, hey, I'm dating this guy that has a fish allergy, to daily life and marrying him. And I said it to somebody the other day, a lot of times, and this is based on a story from Alice from Beyond Celiac, that she was teaching a group of gastroenterologists about celiac, which you'd think they would know. But this doctor watched her trying to order something at a restaurant, stood behind her, and she's like, oh my gosh, I diagnose my clients every single day and I send them on their merry little way. And I don't realize the impact of that. So can you talk about the impact of being diagnosed with it, and you're really just saying, okay, here, you're allergic to fish, and now go on your merry little way? What is that? That's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot to digest figuratively. I remember when, I think for me, it was easy to wrap my head around my husband's food allergy, because I would just avoid fish. If I wanted to eat it, I'd go out with friends. But when my children were diagnosed, it became this bigger kind of task that I had to take on that I wasn't quite sure how to navigate. And my older son, I remember the first time he had an anaphylactic reaction, I was making shrimp scampi. I live near the beach, so shrimp is a thing that we just eat here all the time. And I naively had no clue what was going on. And I thought, goodness, I must have put too much garlic in that shrimp scampi. His lips are swelling. And I say that so people know that you can make a mistake and not understand what is going on during an anaphylactic reaction, because I just wasn't educated at the time. And you would think with the education of my husband, I would know, but people present differently. But day-to-day life was really rocked in our family when my second son was born. He was diagnosed with a wheat, dairy, egg, peanut, tree nut allergy. And I thought, surely I have conquered peanuts and tree nuts and shellfish. I had no clue what to do with wheat. I thought, that's in everything. And I was nursing at the time. And I thought, I remember thinking, what am I going to feed this child? I don't know. And it was at a time about 15 years ago, where food in the store wasn't plentiful. I couldn't walk into a grocery store and simply find something that was dairy-free or gluten-free. And it was a challenge, and it kind of stopped us in our tracks, because we had to really kind of dig deep into figuring out what we could eat and what we couldn't.
Well, and that's a good point, because in 16 years ago, celiac disease and food allergies weren't as on the radar as they are now. And actually, my brother was diagnosed with an allergy to egg. And he's now 50 in his 50s. So way back in the early 70s. I'm like, Mom, wow, how did you make him birthday cakes? And she's like, I just did. I'm like, because there was not Google back in the 1970s. And yeah. And I don't think there was probably flaxseed replacement, back then, So she's like, I just did it. And I guess that's kind of what you do too, right? I mean, you have to.
You do. You just do it. I mean, I love that your mom said, I just did it, because what other choice did she have? We take the information that we have at the time. And I remember asking friends, asking family, really scouring the internet, but not many people I knew had a wheat allergy. And many people kind of thought we were joking when we said he's allergic to wheat, and even explaining what wheat was or is, right, and how it affects his body. So yeah, I think that was a big turning point in our daily allergy life.
Yeah, because it is. And actually, wheat's even in Twizzlers, right? And
yes. Play-Doh.
It's in Play-Doh. Exactly. And does he have a touch reaction? Or,
yes,
as a little kid, he does?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's talk about that for people, because this is the first day. So there's consumption, which means you're going to eat it. There's the touch, and then there's the inhalation of the protein. So do any of them have an allergy reaction to that as well?
Yes, we used to eat wheat pasta, for example, all the time in our home. And we realized very quickly that when we were cooking the wheat pasta, the protein would become aerosolized and my son would start coughing and having difficulty breathing. And we thought, man, okay, we can't have wheat pasta in the house anymore. Even when he visits friends' houses or homes, they have to vacuum the couch because, little crumbs of bread or crackers might be there.
Mm-hmm.
And, he can touch it and then, touch one of the membranes like his mouth, his nose,
Wow.
his eyes, and have a reaction. We've had a reaction in a grocery store. And unfortunately, there was flour on the conveyor belt. And
wow.
yeah, he touched, I think, a bag or something. And I had a reaction from that. And we had a lovely ride to the emergency room. So it is pretty. And by touching, we mean he touched something and then put his hands in his eyes, his mouth, his nose. And, the two body systems or reactions happen. But it's very concerning. I remember my husband telling me stories of when he was a kid and his mom would, kind of send him out the house when she would cook fish. And
really? Wow.
Yes, she would send him out the house, or we were dating at the time. We would go to the movies or something. But, education with food allergy awareness has changed now. But she would kind of shoo him out the house or open the windows because she, didn't know any different. But it's hard navigating an allergy, especially when it can be aerosolized and cause a reaction.
Well, and there's that young boy that died a couple of years ago from his family cooking fish in the house. And I don't think they knew that it was aerosolized. I need to learn how to say that word. And unfortunately passed away from that, so that's not the most common, not everybody's reactions happen that way, correct?
That's correct. And I always tell people, if you know someone with food allergies, you just know one person with food allergies because each person has a different reaction, a different tolerance, and it's important to better understand, what someone's going to by asking questions.
Well, and one of the stories that I tell a lot in my presentations is that this meeting planner asked the questions in her registration form, and a woman shared that she was allergic to tree nuts, but did not share that it was airborne. And the meeting planner had ordered a room full 900 Nutella desserts that were preset. And the woman came up to her an hour and a half before the event and said, by the way, it's airborne allergy. And there's nothing a convention center or hotel could do for 900 already preset desserts, right, in that short time. So she ended up having to eat dinner, somewhere else outside of that room because of that. But then they made the adjustments for the next couple of days, which is great. But it's really important to ask those questions.
It is. I think it's important to ask those questions, but it's also important for people with food allergies to say something as well. I think a lot of times, or at least in my experience with my family and those in the community with food allergies, they may be a little intimidated to say something, but I always encourage to say something because people don't know unless you say something and explain what it is, what your needs are. And people are more apt to kind of jump in and kind of help you.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of backlash from food allergies. Oh, really? You can't eat that? And bullying and things, but we have to stand our ground.
Absolutely. If you're not going to advocate for yourself, who will?
Right. And I think we need to do it in a way that's not, we get defensive because when I started doing this, somebody's like, you're so passionate about this, you're defensive. And I'm like, okay, I got to step back, and it's an education.
It is. I always tell parents when I'm working with them for, whatever kind of disability their child might have in school that you need to bring a honey and hot sauce method to collaborating. Honey is coming in, explaining, educating, and really making sure that people are fully aware of what it is that needs to happen. And if after the education, people still don't understand, more education, you put on a little honey, just bring a little hot sauce, things change.
And what would that hot sauce entail?
Well, it depends on what, if your child has a food allergy and accommodations are not being met, then, you could go into mediation, you could call Office of Civil Rights. There's so many things, different avenues.
Right.
But I work with a lot of families whose children have disabilities. So it just depends. And you don't need to jump to the far, the end all be all solution of the hot sauce. But it's always in my experience to come speak softly.
Well, and I like that because I think the people in the food service industry also are scared because you get those signs of like nobody with food allergies are allowed, or everything in this building has nuts in it, or the companies that are starting to add sesame flour to their products just so they don't have to clean the equipment. I'm like, we're not going to automatically go sue you. We just don't want to die.
No, exactly. And it's not that, I want to quote unquote make trouble. I just want to leave here and know that I can have a safe food experience. And once I have this experience, believe me, I'm going to tell all my friends, all my family, and we're going to come here in droves because that's just what the food allergy community does.
And that's the thing. And you have 4 family members. You don't have any allergies, but you have 4 family members that do. And your dining experience, your dining choices are based on those 4 guys.
It is. And it depends on who I'm going out to eat with at a specific time. As my older 2 children have, become more independent, they're asking more questions and wanting to experiment a little bit more as to which restaurants we go to. And I think that's great. It just comes with a little concern and caution and a little bit more background work that we have to do to plan and kind of make sure that the restaurants we're going to fully understand how to take care of us.
Well, I want to give a shout out to my friend John Chen. He's in Seattle and he's dairy-free and gluten-free. So thanks for watching, John. And so I want to know, okay, the questions that your sons are asking, what kind of things have you taught them, and are they learning on their own about asking about what's in the food? Or if it's something is safe for them?
My older son has really gotten into wanting to make sushi and eat sushi and all the things that are behind that. Well, he has a shellfish allergy, so you can, see where that might be problematic. But he has gone through the experiences of understanding what questions you need to ask, but also if you're looking for a sushi roll, what might be in that roll and how is it prepared? There's a restaurant locally that has sushi and they just do it so well to the point where they have the tamari and they have, separate stations where they make everything and they clean it in separate utensils. And you really can't ask for more than that education and knowing full well that when you speak to, the chef or the waiter or waitress, that your concerns are that your concerns are validated and, all the preparation that goes into that. So there are a lot of questions that they ask, like, how is the food prepared? What time of day maybe they should go? Those sorts of things. And then sometimes if we're going out as a family, they may or may not be comfortable and they just bring their own food. And they know too that, if we're going into a restaurant, I have my safe food because I just would prefer that. So.
Well, and that's good. And we need to also recognize and educate why we have that safe food, right? Because some people are going to say, oh no, you can't do that. Right. And I don't want food service professionals to be super scared about it. I mean, I want them to be concerned, but I want them to be educated and knowledgeable about what they're serving and what their preparation methods are so they can actually share that correctly, right?
Exactly. A great example is my older son was in high school and his band community was going to a specific restaurant, and that specific restaurant doesn't carry anything gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free. And my son decided to bring his own food. Granted, the pancakes he was eating looked like everyone else's pancakes. The vegan egg he was eating looked like everyone else's vegan egg. But I think, having that conversation beforehand, manager or chef really does say, hey, do you have anything? I'm willing to try anything that you have. But if you don't have anything, I still want to be able to participate and interact with my group.
Right. Exactly. And that brings up the Williamsburg case of
Mm-hmm.
the young boy who went on a field trip and he brought in his own food. And, I think it helped make a lot of change in our industry, in looking at food allergies, because it's a long story, but two different court cases, or a court case and then an appeal. But I think it's really, Mary Vargas has said, it's really important to prove that, and that case is that having a wheat allergy, which he did too, was shown by the court that this is a disability.
It is. It definitely inhibits. It definitely inhibits my son's daily life in a number of ways. I mean, he has a 504 in school, which is backed by law. Section 504 for the Americans with Disabilities Act. He has. When we go into a place of business like the movies or maybe a water park, we bring our food and we explain this is why. Absolutely, if there's an opportunity for us to eat something there that's safe, we do it. And we really look forward to going and finding places where we can patronage. It just, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
So what do you wish, you've kind of brought this up a little bit, but what do you wish that people knew more about food allergies?
I wish people knew how dangerous living with a food allergy can be. I think, or at least from my experience, I think people know someone with a food allergy and know, maybe the signs or symptoms and think, oh, well, this person hasn't had a reaction in a while, but food allergies can be dangerous. And if someone tells you they have a food allergy, please take them serious.
And so let's answer that question. What does that mean to you, seriously? What does the word seriously mean to you? Seriously.
Well, my middle son with a wheat allergy mentioned one time in a 504 meeting that he doesn't often go to friends' homes because there's a lot that kind of goes into preparation for that. Even to the point of maybe riding in a friend's car, because most people eat in their car,
right?
Whether it's goldfish or crackers, everyone is eating. And him having the experience of touching something that he's allergic to and not knowing it and, rubbing his eyes or putting his hands in his mouth, those kinds of situations can be scary and lead to a food allergic reaction. And he, more so than my other children, have had many rides to the emergency room because of an anaphylactic reaction. So if someone says, hey, I, would love to come over, or, hey, if I do, maybe is it possible for you to do these kinds of precautions to kind of help? Take them seriously and, offer something, if you have someone coming over your home for a meal, make sure you can do everything you can to keep them safe.
And so, and there's two things that came out of what you just said that made me think, like, we touch our faces, and this came out with COVID. We touch our faces, our eyes, our mouths inherently without thinking, right? Mm-hmm. And so touching a conveyor belt that has flour on it, or touching a seat thing that somebody ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on, right? You don't really think about that you're touching that, and then you're going to touch your face. It's nothing that we normally pay attention to, right? And think about. But your son has got to really pay attention to that.
He does. And he's more aware of if he's out and someone else touches something, I can spot it because I'm his mom, and I see it with an eagle eye. He's looking at what they're touching next, knowing when to avoid it. So many of his reactions were contact and then him touching something else. I think one time he left, I think it was middle school. He left in an ambulance because he was helping open the door for someone in the cafeteria. And he had an anaphylactic reaction shortly after. So he's very cognizant, but even with his efforts of, keeping himself safe, things still happen.
Exactly. And how old is he now? How old are all three of them?
He's 16. My oldest is 20. The one in high school just turned 16. And the youngest is 10. So they're doing well. We haven't had an allergic reaction in several years.
Okay, well, that's good. That's very good. Okay, so that other idea that came from your something has already left my brain, but how So when you're working with somebody who, from bridging the gap, working from going to from the diagnosis to, living in real life, what are some tips that you have for people?
Well, know that you're not alone. I remember feeling completely alone after I received the diagnosis. And the doctor called and said, hey, by the way, the test came back. Your son has a wheat, dairy, and egg allergy at the time. And I said, well, what do I do? And they said, oh, just avoid wheat, dairy, and egg. And I said, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. And hung up the phone. And I was kind of that's exactly how we found out. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do now? I have no idea. And thankfully, I was directed to a store in our area. It was one of the only few tiny little stores that contained gluten-free food. And oh my goodness, it felt like, I always thought it was like a present going in and seeing all the things that we could eat. But it took a while to get to that point. And I remember thinking, okay, well, if we can't have wheat, then maybe I'll make, for breakfast, he's a 1-year-old. We can feed him avocado. That has protein. My son hates avocado. Or let's think maybe we can find something at that time, gluten-free bread has evolved over the years. Yeah. So, and he's a toddler. He wanted to eat what everyone else was eating. So it's been quite a journey.
Okay, so now you saying that, it now just pops that question back into my head. So they tell you that you're like, okay, you're allergic to wheat and dairy. What does wheat? You just don't see wheat. I mean, you do because of the Food Allergy Labeling and Consumer Protection Act. You're supposed to see the word wheat on a package, but where do you find wheat, or what are other terms for wheat that somebody should be looking for?
Well, wheat is hidden in so many different things. Like we mentioned earlier, Twizzlers, that was a realization. Twizzlers, mm-hmm. Play-Doh, sometimes, especially if you have celiac, there's, wheat isn't in oats, but you can't eat, oats because of how it's processed. And I think when we look for foods and ingredients that have wheat in it, they pop up in the most unusual places. I would say Play-Doh was the biggest one. He was in preschool. I had to learn how to make gluten-free Play-Doh. That was fun.
Oh, wow. Who would have thought, right?
Yes, gluten-free Play-Doh. And his preschool teacher went above and beyond and found the gluten-free flour mix I was using and started making her own Play-Doh for the whole class.
Oh, awesome.
So, but when I talk to parents who want to bridge the gap between diagnosis and daily life, it's really about coming to terms with, the actual diagnosis and figuring out, okay, we know we have this, whatever this might be, whether it's ADHD or food allergies or asthma. What do we do now? Because you left the doctor's office and you might have all these pamphlets that you have to read and go over. And there's so much information nowadays that you can look into, but you have someone that kind of helps you take your hand and say, it's going to be okay. Let's mm-hmm. just take a breath. Know that you're going to learn a lot, and there will be some things that you still just don't know, and that's okay. And we take it day by day. Doesn't work. We take it moment by moment.
Well, and that's huge, because it's when you learn that you're allergic to wheat and you're like, I can't have this, and then dairy on top of that, right?
And eggs.
And eggs. Yeah. I mean, it is, and eggs and dairy and wheat are used as fillers in a lot of foods, right? And people don't realize that.
No, it definitely was a wake-up call for our family. And I think now, because of how we've adjusted, we've learned so many different foods that are out there and so many other grains that we can eat that we probably wouldn't have had we not been diagnosed with food allergies.
What's your favorite other grain?
Oh my goodness. There's so many. I think one of my favorite, I think I didn't know what cassava flour was. That's mm-hmm. something I love working with. I love rice flour, especially when I have a mean gluten-free chicken that I make and I use rice flour for it. It's very crispy when it's fried. I mm-hmm. didn't know that was a thing. I also, we love our quinoa. We had to say goodbye, mm-hmm. obviously, to couscous. Right. But at quinoa, I remember seeing it in the store and looking at it thinking, what in the world is quinoa?
Exactly.
Yes, and then I was cultured and learned it was quinoa. But there's so many different ones. I mean, I think for us, it's been this journey of learning about food and the different ways you can make food, and know that if you would like to make a pizza, there isn't just one way. You don't have to necessarily use wheat flour. You could use, nowadays, pizzas being made with cauliflower. So many different ways to make something. But yeah, it's definitely, my grandmother loved to cook. She's from North Carolina. So I have that love and sense of family and cooking. And I've just taken her love and sense of family and kind of created our own version of that here, a safe version for us here at home.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. Where in North Carolina is she from?
Rocky Mount.
Okay. So kind of close to me in New Bern. I'm not there now, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, and food is such an important part of our lives. I mean, we all have to eat, and we have to learn how to navigate how to eat safely ourselves and rely on other people. So I know at the beginning of the session, I introduced you as the vice president of FACT, which again is the Food Allergy Anaphylaxis Connection Team. So can you tell people about what FACT is and what your role there is?
FACT is a nonprofit organization that focuses on education, awareness, and advocacy for those navigating food allergies. And it's an amazing organization who really created a ton of information. So all the information we were talking about earlier about what do you do after you're diagnosed with food allergies, FACT has downloads and guides and curriculum for educators that people can go on the website and just kind of pull anything that's pertinent. And it's such a jam-packed resource for parents and adults living with food allergies.
And one of the things that you said and earlier too is the advocacy of that, right? And advocating for yourself. And there are a lot of different laws and regulations that are coming out now around food allergies. In fact, is a big part of making sure those happen, right?
Yes.
And get in front of senators. That's important.
Absolutely.
And then you can help people understand, like the 504. If you don't know what a 504 plan that is under the ADA, and actually let's just talk about the ADA-AA, which is the American with Disabilities Act Amendments Act of 2008, which added the word eating as well as all of our bodily functions to the list of major life activities.
Exactly.
And that really opened up a lot of these laws, right?
It did. It really opened up a huge avenue for people navigating food allergies, and especially children in schools navigating food allergies, because obviously if you were to eat an allergen, say something with wheat in it, and you're allergic to wheat, that's going to inhibit all of our, bodily functions. And I'm not going to be able to pay attention in class. I'm not going to be able to see because possibly I may have passed out. There's so many factors that play into this, but I'm so grateful for that, because prior to, that law, life was challenging. I mean, life is challenging, but I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for FALCA because, having labeling and clear labeling. Before I had to learn, every Latin version of wheat or a nut, and families now don't have to do that. So advocacy is very important. And without having advocates go and talk with Congress or even talking with your local state General Assembly, things don't change.
No, exactly. And you've been to Congress, right? Or you've been on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, we've been to Capitol Hill multiple times, talked with our state senators or our legislators. As a family, that's just what we do. I told the kids, if you want to make change happen, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to go and tell someone your story to make things change. But we've done that for many years, and it's encouraging to see that families that come behind us, have the benefit of the steps that we took to help enact certain things. For example, in the city we live in, now bus drivers are trained to administer epinephrine. If a child self-carries, they will, there's a protocol and everything, but the bus driver, knows how to do it. And that wasn't the case before, 10 years ago.
That's fantastic. And just for everybody to know, you can actually go on to the American Red Cross website and take their epinephrine administrative class. It's 30 minutes. You learn how to administer an EpiPen. But I think that's really important for anybody to understand how to do that, especially if somebody does self-carry.
It does. It's very important.
Yeah. And Virginia is also one of those other states, is one of the 30, I think it's 36 states that allows places of public accommodation to actually stock epinephrine without requiring to self-carry.
Yeah, in schools, we have the stock epinephrine law because of a little girl that passed away on a playground because she picked up a nut and ate it and had a allergic reaction. So, unfortunately, it's situations like that propel laws to change, but also, being able to advocate as a parent and have my children self-advocate is really powerful.
Well, and that I love that's there. And because it's also really important for people to understand that not all, depending on what state, county, city you're in, not all EMTs carry epinephrine or are allowed to administer it. So if you do have a severe allergy, I'm going to say, make sure you get them, be a self-carry person.
Yeah. When my son had his first anaphylactic reaction, or the middle son had it was the day after his first birthday. And I had just given him cottage cheese and toast for breakfast. He had an anaphylactic reaction. I called 911. They told me to administer, my other son's epi. And then in the ambulance, they were trying to administer epi again. It just, it's important to know ahead of time what they have. And, that's a simple phone call to ask, to inquire.
Exactly. Okay. So I ask this of all of my guests. So what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you?
A safe and sustainable
and
experience and inclusive food and beverage experience means that my family can go to a restaurant and look at a menu that is current and understand the ingredients, what exactly is in a food, where it comes from, what, cross contact issues there may be in the facility, or, what other allergens may be contained in a dish, and having the staff and the chef and the front house managers, back house managers, all fully understanding, the dangers and having that knowledge of food allergies, and having a variety. I think at this point, we just want a variety. If my child goes to eat, it would be lovely to have something other than just a plain steak or plain breast of fish, or a chicken breast and some vegetables. It would be, nice to have maybe another grain like that quinoa that isn't made with dairy or something, a little olive oil, just some options. Because as I tell my kids, you want to spend your money, you want to enjoy, life like your friends and others. But it would be lovely to do that when we knew that the staff was well-trained.
Oh, I love that. And in every single thing that you said, there's so many points in there that I'm going to make sure that I jot them all down and put them in the list when we post this. Because I think those are so many different things and opportunities for a food service company to a restaurant to understand. And our friend Shandy Chernow, who owns Service Star, a stat that she has on her website is that a food allergic person's bill at a restaurant is typically 38% less than a non-food allergic person's bill, because they're eating just the broccoli, or they're eating just the potato because they're not comfortable in eating the rest. I'm like, so restaurant, think about that. Kristin just said she wants more options. Think about how much more money you could make if you had more options.
And if it's just somewhere where we were comfortable with, we would go all the time and tell our friends, and we would bring friends and family. And yes, because we have a couple of places we go, but I would spend all the money in the world.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kristin. And everybody, this is Kristin Osborne. She is a disability advocate. You know what? Well, we talked a little bit about that, but Kristin Osborne is a disability advocate, a food allergy consultant, and the VP of Education for FACT. But just going back real quick,
what do we need to know anything else more about the disability aspect of it and actually DEI or equity or diversity and inclusion, however, whatever way we want to install that term?
I'll share one experience I had in the disability world. I was trained to be a disability advocate by the state of Virginia, and our very first meeting was held in Richmond. And we were very excited to learn more about advocacy and intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, and we were just very eager. And one of my classmates has a peanut allergy, and we live in Virginia. If you know anything about Virginia, you know that peanuts are plentiful here, and it's a staple. And as the meeting was started, they were passing out peanuts, and I immediately went into oh no mode. And my friend is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say anything. I was like, don't worry about it. So I go and I tell the director, I was like, she has a peanut allergy, and having these peanuts in this room is problematic. And they said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. So it was that point where I'm in a disability environment. We're learning about those with disabilities and how disability advocacy has changed throughout the years. And I'm just kind of reflecting on the fact that, wow, I'm in a room with people that are very understanding and know about some things, but here I am, we're experiencing, another kind of disability, and not everybody, understood it, but we were able to kind of move past that. And from that point on, I was tasked with making sure that every food preference was taken care of. And it was an insightful experience.
That's a great insightful experience, because we don't know what we don't know. Right.
Exactly.
And then what you've said throughout this whole thing is it's a lot of education. And I like your honey and hot sauce breakdown, because we need to bring it with honey. Like, hey, here's some honey, as long as you're not vegan or allergic to it, right? Here's some honey,
right?
The hot sauce. Yeah. You don't want my hot sauce.
No, I feel like we can come from a place of collaboration. Let's work together. Let's educate. And once we, if we surpass that, then hot sauce comes, and you don't want that. You don't want it.
Well, Kristin, thank you so much for what you do. I'm sure that everybody listening here has learned one or two nuggets at least. Is there any closing things that you want to say to the group, to the audience?
Oh, well, just know that when you are navigating a celiac, or you're now navigating food allergies, just know that it's okay to say, to stand up and advocate for yourself. And the advocating that you do actually helps other people come behind you. So just know it's not just you, it's others as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So everybody, this is day 1 of Food Allergy Awareness Week. And this was Kristin Osborne. You can find her at the prioritizedgroup.com and on social media with the same Facebook and Instagram, the Prioritized Group. And on Twitter, it's her name, Kristin Osborne. So I will share all those links out. And tomorrow we will be here with talking about what does it mean? So taking what Kristin's and my conversation a little bit more to the next level, and with Ruth from the UK. So there's food allergies are not just in the US, they're all over the world. So stay here, and we'll be here all week long. So stay tuned. And until next time, stay safe and eat well.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.